for its funding requirements. But we'll have to keep in our mind, it is actually not only central banks lending to government, but also central banks lending to banking sector will constitute what is normally known in the market as the money printing. So therefore, we can see that central bank has a huge problem of creating money in order to keep the government going, as well as in order to keep the banking sector going. Now, the position with the banking sector, the government is also very precarious now. We had a Treasury bill auction today. In the Treasury bill auction, 97.5 billion Sri Lanka rupees worth of Treasury bills were offered to the market. But even after allowing the interest rates to go up by 100 basis points, in the case of the 1-year Treasury bills, the central bank had been able to get only 50% of that. So that it means is central bank has to accommodate another 50%, which comes to about 48 billion by printing money in the parlance of the common man. What it means is that we so far do not see any sign of reaching a balance in the financial sector. What it also means is that even though the Treasury bill rate has gone up to 24% now, that rate is not sufficient for investors to put money into the Treasury bill market, because the going inflation, according to the inflation trackers, is about 74%, and as a result, the interest rates will have to go up further. But what it would mean is that when it comes to attaining the development of the real sector, it will be a terrible disincentive for the real sector to develop itself. Therefore, what we have to do is that the central bank had already allowed the exchange rate to float in the market, but the rate at which the funds are available to Sri Lanka have not been sufficient for people to send them through the official channels, and as a result, the black market is still pretty much in operation. And what it should do now is to eliminate the black market by allowing the exchange rate to depreciate further and attracting funds from the people who are keeping them outside, thinking that the rupee might fall further, and make the necessary funding available to the banking sector. In this regard, any rapid financing facility which the country would get from IMF will be a very advantageous position, because we might get, if we get 50% of our quota, we will get about 400 million US dollars. If we get 100% of the quota, we'll get about 800 million US dollars, and that will be delivered to the government, Central Bank of Sri Lanka, in one shot. And when the central bank gets that amount of money, in fact, its foreign reserves, which are now virtually zero, will go up to 800 million US dollars. And it will also keep the sentiments down, because the speculators are now thinking that the rupee might fall further. But when they come to know that the IMF is standing by Sri Lanka, they will start bringing their money back to Sri Lanka. And as a result, we can expect the financial sector to reach a good level of balance there. But for to eliminate the rupee shortage in the banking sector, it is necessary for banks to increase the deposit rates further, because already they have increased the fixed deposit rates from around, say, 6% per annum to 15% per annum. And in my view, that 15% is also not sufficient. So what it means is that the deposit rates of commercial banks will have to go up to 20% at least in order to eliminate the rupee shortage in the banking sector. Now, this is the way forward that we have to do in order to bring a balance in the financial sector. And now I will concentrate on developing the real sector. Now, in the case of the real sector, we need the development because what we actually finally consume or use as a raw material is what is being produced in the real sector. And those are called the real goods and services. For example, if the central bank prints 5,000 rupee note and gives it to us, it has no any meaning unless we can buy say a kilogram of rice. And if the facility is not available, that 5,000 rupee note is simply a little piece of paper with no value at all. So therefore, the government has to take action to develop the real sector. Again, I'll have to remind you now, Sri Lanka had gone to IMF on 16 occasions in the past. On 9 occasions, Sri Lanka had completed the program with IMF. 7 occasions, Sri Lanka had abandoned it midway through. And many people are asking the question, having gone to IMF on so many occasions, why hasn't Sri Lanka's economy been developed? That is because the IMF will actually help us to resolve our financial sector issues. It doesn't help us to resolve the real sector issues, and nor can IMF do it, nor can central bank do it. It is the responsibility of the government to come up with a plan to develop the real sector. What had happened in the past is governments of Sri Lanka, in fact, got the money from IMF. They resolved the financial issue problem, but they had not taken any action to develop the real sector, and as a result, the real sector has remained undeveloped in Sri Lanka today. So therefore, along with the present facility which Sri Lanka would get from the International Monetary Fund, we must have the real sector plan also. So that plan, we will have actually a very short-term requirement, then the short, medium term to long-term requirement, and we must have all these things available. But I will have to emphasize another factor here. For Sri Lanka to develop the real sector, we have to actually get the entrepreneurs to come and invest in Sri Lanka. For that purpose, one of the most essential ground conditions, in addition to the balancing the financial sector, is the existence of a good governance system in Sri Lanka. And people are critical of the present system in Sri Lanka, of full of corruption. There is no rule of law in Sri Lanka. The laws are applied selectively to people and discriminating some other people. There is no way for Sri Lanka to maintain law and order. The judiciary is being criticized by many as not being independent after the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. So because of these reasons, it is very necessary for Sri Lanka to have a good governance system in place if it wants to encourage the private sector businessmen to invest both local and foreign in Sri Lanka. So that is a must, and that is why people are arguing that we must now repeal the 20th Amendment immediately and go for a 19th Amendment plus 19 plus amendment, where we would be actually strengthening the institutional setup of the country as a precondition for Sri Lanka to develop. But of course, like the financial sector, that is only a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition. The sufficient condition is that entrepreneurs will have to mobilize resources. They will have to use the human and physical resources in varying combinations and develop real goods and services for consumption by Sri Lankan people, as well as for the purpose of exporting to other countries. That would enable Sri Lankans to earn a higher income, which actually will enable Sri Lanka to move from the current lower middle income status to higher middle income status, and finally the goal of becoming a rich country within maybe another 30 to 40 year time period. In this context, the most important thing that we have to do is we have to introduce technology to Sri Lanka's production system so that the productivity in Sri Lanka will improve. And that's actually the responsibility of the government and not the central bank. or the ING. Why I say that we have to introduce technology here is Sri Lanka is still in the second industrial revolution. That is because most of the machinery that we use in agriculture and also in other manufacturing processes are driven by electricity, which is the characteristic of the second industrial revolution. But by 1970s, the world had moved to the third industrial revolution, where it is the electronic things that had ruled the manufacturing process. And as a result, the world had been able to produce things at a cheaper cost and also produce more with less. What we mean by that is the world has been able to improve the productivity in their production processes. But unfortunately for Sri Lanka today, the world has moved to the fourth industrial revolution, which is actually an extension from the third industrial revolution. And the production system in the fourth industrial revolution is actually production sharing, number one, because no one would produce one particular finished product in a country. It will be contributed by many nations, many factories, many entrepreneurs. Number two, they will use the advanced technology like Internet of Things, blockchain, machine learning, artificial intelligence. All these things would be used by the manufacturers for the purpose of producing them. And the world has moved to the fourth industrial revolution today. So what it means is that Sri Lanka, which is still in the second industrial revolution, will have to bypass the third industrial revolution and move to the fourth industrial revolution. Now, this is a difficult thing, but not impossible if Sri Lanka has a proper plan. What Sri Lanka can do in this connection is it can learn many lessons from Vietnam, which had introduced a roadmap with appropriate timeline to convert Vietnam's economy to the fourth industrial revolution by year 2030. The plan was started in year 2020, and in the 10-year time period, Vietnam is planning to join the fourth industrial revolution, and it is actually working on that. In the new roadmap they have produced, in addition to manufacturing of real goods, they have concentrated on offering services to the rest of the world by using the advanced technology. And they cover education, healthcare services, tourism services, shipping services, airline services, and all the types of services which actually Vietnam can produce for the rest of the world. Now, this is a good lesson for Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka had been concentrating on developing its real merchandise goods, like shoes by our good friend Dr. Kulathunga Rajapaksa, garments. Those are real merchandise goods. And we had not paid any attention to the development of the services sector in Sri Lanka. In today's context, we don't talk anymore about the development of the merchandise goods or visible goods. We are actually talking about the development of the goods and services. And also we don't talk about the export of goods, we talk about the export of goods and services. So this is where Sri Lanka has to now enter. We'll have to concentrate on the development of the services sector. That is because we have a natural limitation of expanding our merchandise goods sector, because we don't have raw material. Even if you want to have a tire factory in Sri Lanka, the tire factory cannot get the required quantity of rubber from within the economy, and they have to import it from some other country. And this has happened to many tire factories, many rubber-based industries, which have to import latex and rubber sheets from countries like Thailand and Vietnam. That is because we don't have raw material. But of course, we have one particular resource, which is our human brain. And that human brain has to be used by Sri Lanka in order to develop the services sector. Now, the things that I will tell you that that line is that the information and communication technology, education services, in which Professor Lakshman Watawala is engaged, and also I am myself engaged. Then the healthcare services, shipping services, and all these things have to be developed in Sri Lanka by using the advanced technology. By doing that, we would be able to make a balance between the manufacturing of goods and the and producing of services. And with that, we would be able to develop Sri Lanka's economy, and we can actually reach our goal of becoming a developed country, in my view, by about say 2050, if we continuously go along with this path. So the path from here is therefore is not a very easy thing. It is a rugged path, but we must have a policy consistency for that purpose. At the ground level, we must have two things. One is the financial sector should be in balance with low inflation. And the second one is good governance system should be there in order to encourage investors to come and invest in Sri Lanka. After that, Sri Lanka will have to introduce technology, and that technology either Sri Lanka can borrow from other countries as Vietnam and China had done in the initial period of development. But later on, Sri Lanka can develop its own technology because we have faculties of technology now in most of the Sri Lankan local universities. At the same time, we have first-class research institutions like the Industrial Technology Institute or ITI, Rubber Research Institute, Tea Research Institute, Coconut Research Institute, and Department of Agriculture, which is staffed with the most advanced, highly educated research people. And all these institutions will have to bring into task, and we must be able to develop it properly. So I will stop my presentation right now to summarize what we have said. So far, Sri Lanka's present economic situation is actually very well known. It's a very catastrophic situation, and I don't have to talk about the past and how we have reached that level. But what we must do in order to develop the balanced part of the year, we must actually go for a loan from the IMF to inculcate confidence among the investors. Central bank will have to further tighten monetary policy and bring about the tame the inflation and also depreciation of the currency. At the same time, the government will have to develop the real sector. For that purpose, one of the most important requirements is to have good governance system in place. So the 20th Amendment to Constitution should be immediately repealed, and we have to go for 19 plus amendment. And in order to develop the real sector, the government will have to introduce a measure to enable Sri Lanka to move from the second industrial revolution to the fourth industrial revolution. So thank you very much, and we can discuss these things during the question and answer time.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much for explaining beautifully the challenges that we are facing as a country, and also explaining how to overcome this economic crisis that we are facing today. There are some questions asked from you, but I'll come to those questions later in the Q&A session. Now, let me warmly invite the incumbent president of CMA Sri Lanka, Professor Lakshman Watawala. As you know, Professor Watawala is the founder president of CMA Sri Lanka. Not only that, Professor Watawala is also the founder president of AAT Sri Lanka. Being a chartered accountant, he is in the Hall of Fame of Chartered Accountants, and he has been the president of South Asian Federation of Accountants. When South Asian Federation of Accountants was formed, he was the vice president of the institute, and also he has received many prestigious awards, including the National Honours Sri Lanka Sikamani in 2019. Professor Watawala, may I now warmly invite you to speak on the impact of the problems that we are facing today on the education sector and also on the financial sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rutira. I think you are doing an excellent job. I must thank all our very eminent speakers today, because they have really come to explain this current situation of how you can take the right path to overcome financial and economic crisis. We listened to Dr. Vijayawardena because I know that Dr. Vijayawardena has for a long time, maybe from 2020 or from 2019, he has been taking up this matter, as to how we are really going to manage our finances. He's already spoken about that, but I will really want to speak from the point of view of the management accountants and the financial accountants and also the professional accountants in business as to what is really required in order to put this country on the right path to overcome the financial and economic crisis. This problem that we have really inherited or due to mismanagement, this has arisen, is a result of maybe the mismanagement, if I say is correct. Today, there is hardly any management in many areas. I think Dr. Vijayawardena already mentioned, we are having a zero reserve balance. Now, as a professional accountant, I just want to talk a few words on this reserve, because I know that most of you are from the private sector. So just think for yourself, your company, if you are going to have a reserve, how does that reserve arise? You see, the reserve is a surplus for your organization. If you are a company, incorporated or a private sector organization, to have a reserve, you must have a surplus. Then you can use the reserve for whatever developments that you need. But in the economic terms, like what Dr. Vijayawardena mentioned, the reserve that we are now talking of is really the loans that we get from the foreign countries and whatever surpluses that we generate. So it's really a cash flow system that we are talking of. So maybe I think Dr. Vijayawardena may be able to later clarify it, but I think that is the reason, because he said that we are now zero. If we get $800 million from the IMF, our reserves will go 100 by 800 million. But in the case of a company, our reserves will not go up by that amount. We will have a liability. Our loans will go up by that amount. So this is one thing that the government has to do. As financial accountants, as management accountants, we have to ensure that the proper records are being kept. I have not seen or heard any of these loans, how much is due from the government. Now there was a budget debate. Did they table a statement to say that this is the real financial position of our country? So really, we are professional accountants, but if the professional accountants are maybe not recruited or not made use of, or if the finance ministry is not engaging in this sort of financial recording and processing, we are in great trouble. In fact, today's trouble is as a result of that, because I feel that the budget 2022 should have discussed this matter. In fact, I know that Dr. Vijayawardena wrote many articles. The budget is something they have presented, but they have not spoken of the sickness of the economy. Now, that's why we are saying, as accountants, as financial accountants, as management accountants, these are not seen. These done in any public quoted company. How is it being done? If you are a public quoted company, you come under a regulator, the Securities Exchange and Commission. You have to submit your accounts quarterly. You have to ensure that your balance sheets are audited at the end of the year, no delays. So these are, and also timely. Now, the timely is the most important thing, because today, now we have been talking of this problem maybe 2 years earlier or much earlier. Everyone said there are solutions. Many of them, including Dr. Vijayawardena, said, go to IMF. But then the government said, we have homegrown solutions. Okay, then give us the solution. They should have tabled that solution in the parliament and said, this is how we are going to solve this problem. But at the same time, if I was someone who was holding such a position, and with the experience that we have, I would say that we will also have a plan B. Plan A, homegrown. Plan B, we will go to the IMF. But what did we do? We spoke so much. Ultimately, we said we don't want IMF. Now we have gone kneeling to the IMF. So these are things that you have to accept, you know. But I am saying that the financial management is in a very sorry state of affairs. We have the chartered accountant set up in 1955 from the L.M. De Silva report. It was set up, a body incorporated by an act of parliament. We are similar to maybe most of the other institutions that are there. But then are they making use of these chartered accountants? Are they making use of the Sri Lankan management accountants? Now, this has not been done, you know, because I can tell you that when the cabinet in 2014 approved for the CMA, because CMA was a new body that came in, that they are qualified accountants should be recruited to the government service. It took them 6 years to implement this. So you can see that they are anti or adverse to the professional accountants, because we will tell them how this has to be done. Then the sorry state of our affairs, we are unable to pay debts. Now anyone will know, you know, any businessman will know that if you go to a bank, how long they will take to give the loan, especially if you are in a very, very sick situation. They will go through everything, and after they look at everything, after you have the right proposals, a sustainable solution. Now that is what the IMF will tell you, come with a sustainable solution. You have to correct your solutions. Now everyone knows that some of the things that they have done. What will the IMF say? Our revenue is not enough to match the expenditure. Would any organization work in this manner? If your expenditure is more than your income, you will definitely go bankrupt. There is no one to help you. But today the government is in that sorry state. So we are sorry because we as professionals, we know what has to be done. But unfortunately, they have not been done. So maybe that they need to have a public-private partnership where we can help them. Maybe not charge them, but free of charge. Tell them this is what has to be done. Then at the end of the year, our auditors, those are also the chartered accountants, will be able to audit and say that this is the report that we are having. This is what has happened. So I think all these should be available, you know, because otherwise we were talking of the accountability. Now just tell me, now you know that we with our various developments that we have been taken, we have gone up the ladder. What was the ladder? Newly developed economy. What happened? We lost all the benefits that we had earlier. Maybe we were getting various GSPs, we were getting concession, maybe exports to USA. Unfortunately, all the garment industries went to Bangladesh because we lost that advantage that we had. But we were able to still fight for it. We were able to work for it. We were able to go a higher bracket. I think that's the way that one has to look at it and then do it, you know. So that's why this financial management and this accountability, what I was trying to come and say is that now we have come up to this level. Now earlier we used to go for loans only to the maybe the World Bank, the ADB and all these agencies because we got concessional interest rates. But what happened? After that, we have now achieved a new status. Now, my problem is now Dr. Vijayawardhan also mentioned about education. Have we gone up to that level? In the education, our skills, have we gone up to that level? I can tell you definitely that we have not done. Because if we had gone up those skills, today we will not be in that position. Look at the major frauds that have taken place. Look at the hedging facility that took place. Who are the people who did the hedging? Are they maybe skilled people? Are there people who have been trained in that area? Unfortunately, no. There are people who have been playing cricket and other things, and then they do the hedging. So what happens? The country lost. But what I'm saying, accountability is a responsibility. If you have done something wrong, get hold of him and take action. But is that happening? No. So then how can the country run? Our problems are all that. Then the central bank scam. What happened? Still they are talking about it. No action. So like that, there are so many that have happened, but the accountability is not there. You can't run a country without accountability. You can't run a firm without accountability. If I have my own firm, if I have a private sector organization or a public sector organization, I am telling you this, I have also run public sector organizations. I have sacrificed 20 years of my best period to put the corporations and make profit for them, loss-making organizations to make them profit. Now, Dr. Vijay mentioned about the exports, the garment industry bringing in the foreign exchange. It was we who were able to do that, as a chairman of the Director General of the BOI, we went throughout the country, set up the factories and then did it. Now, if you, I will just give you one example. Today, he was talking of technology. Now, that is the most important thing, Today, I know that so many people have come to us. There are so many vacancies in the IT field, the BPO industry, the BPM industry, so many vacancies, but we don't have the skilled people. So what are we doing? We are really not taking action. We need to take action. And I think this education sector, we need to have public-private partnership. That is the best way that we can do it. Today, you know that if we do that, now a chartered accountant or a management accountant can qualify at 21 or 22. But what is the age of a person who comes out from the university? 24, 25, doctor might be 27, 28. So I don't think a country can really prosper or work in this sort of fashion, So we are really in a very, very bad situation. Today, the people are asking for a system change. Now, the system change is that we have to change all our systems. All these people, all these government authorities, if you do not change, we are going to be sunk. So system change means all the systems have to be changed. Because I can tell you who are the people who built the garment industry? Is it the government sector? No. From the government sector, we gave all the incentives. We gave them all the infrastructure. They wanted power, they want electricity, they want roadways. We gave everything. But they put up the factory. They took the responsibility. They trained the workers. All these people who are as Samurdi, they can all be taken to these factories and given the jobs. So that's what we really mean by development. It has to come from the top, because I know that I have worked with the president and he was there at all the garment factory openings. That is how we work, because I'm really ashamed as to see this country in this sorry state of situation after sacrificing so much for this country, because they are really in a very, very bad situation. Then so revenue expenditure, what happens when the expenditure is high? You are borrowing. Now there is a very, very nice thing, I told you that we are a newly maybe economy or whatever that you call it. So what did we do? Earlier when we went to World Bank, ADB, they studied everything. And they said, okay, if this is right, we give you the money. But they found a very, very convenient way. International sovereign bonds. They started taking left, right, and center, all these international sovereign bonds. Today, we have to pay all international sovereign bonds. What is the rate of interest? Sky high rates. No one is bothered. Who is responsible? No one responsible. So you can see that the government has been put into trouble by all these people who have been taking wrong decisions, not the right decisions, taking loans, investing in projects that are not giving any return. So I think all these system changes, this whole thing has to change. Otherwise, we will be nowhere. We as professionals, we are very saddened by this situation, You see, if you really look at even the parliament, 29 appointed members to be appointed. How many professionals are being appointed? It's a very, very sad situation. Maybe the founders of this constitution thought that they will take some very, very useful people who can help the parliament, and that means the country, because we are serving the public of this country. We are not there to serve ourselves. As professionals, we have to do. Then what are the other important things of professionals? You have a code of conduct, a code of ethics, integrity. Honesty. Dr. Vijayavardhana spoke of corruption. Today, what are we having? Corruption, wastage, all these ill-gotten things. So that's why this cost management is very important. If you look at SO is the then chairman of the COP. He made a recommendation. All corporations are in a very, their cost systems are very inadequate. You must immediately employ cost accountants in these institutions, and the Treasury take action. To date, they even have not noticed it. So this is why we are having reports, the Auditor General's reports. But what is the action? We need action. Action means if you do something wrong, you have to take action. Otherwise, it is no point, because today that is the case. Now, if you just take the gas matter, you see, you change the ratio of the gas, and so many hundred odd people had explosions and some of them killed. But who is responsible? Can you tell whether there was anyone responsible? No. So accountability is not there. Accountability, in other terms, is the responsibility. Someone must be responsible. Now, these are the things that we learn in accounting, because the first thing that even as those days we call it the article clerk, these are basic things that we know: integrity, honesty, then accountability, everything that has to be done. So then the financial discipline. Where is the financial discipline? Look at the SOEs, the bigger losses. But I must say one thing. Now we have the Ceylon Electricity Board. Everyone is saying it's running at a big loss. I remember when I was the chairman of the People's Bank, the biggest deposits was with the CEB, the Ceylon Electricity Board. How did that happen? The raw material was coming at zero cost. They were using water, and they were having the highest deposit. Then after that, what happened with the thermal power plant? Then did they do any sort of proper work on this? No. They were just going, and they knew the cost of production is higher than the selling price. So these are proper things that that's why management accountants there, cost accountants there, financial accountants there. But then are they being made use of to see that all these institutions are running properly? That must be a must. Otherwise, how can you do? Now, I'm just telling you in the CEB, if the government decides a price, if their cost is 14 rupees, sorry, cost is 20 rupees, government decides you must sell power at 14 rupees. Who pays this 6 rupees? You have to pay a subsidy. The government has to pay that. Otherwise, this organization will be run down. No efficiency, no productivity. Everyone will think that this is really a loss making. They will put so many people to work. All the ministers will put their people, and then ultimately all these things are running. So no one is bothered because it's running at such a big loss. So government, you know why the government does not put that? If they put a subsidy, you must put it in the budget. If you have to subsidy, you have to put a budget. But they don't want to put it because the budget is already, maybe expenditure is very high. But that is the proper sort of management, because then you can hold the chairman of the CEB, the general manager of the CEB responsible for what they are doing. It is the same in the CPC also. If their price is at one level and the government decides on the price, then there has to be a subsidy. So I think this proper accounting, no one is bothered. They say we will just do it. But we have accounting officers, secretaries of ministries, all these areas. But unfortunately, they are not working in the proper manner. You know the civil service. The civil service was one of the best services we had in the Asian region. Then we had this whole thing being changed to public service. And you know what the purpose of a public servant is? A public servant has to advise the minister whether he is doing the right thing. But today what is happening? Minister will say, okay, you do this. If you don't do this, I will transfer you. You can't run a country like that. We must have a separate public service commission, a public service commission that will appoint all these people. That's why Dr. Vijayavardhana said the 19 plus has to come. If the 19 plus comes, then we know that we can do the right thing. Public servants have to be made accountable. Today, so many ministries. Have you heard anything what the ministries have been saying? You see, if you are a chairman of a corporation, you go to the corp, they ask, have you got your corporate plan? Today, all the secretaries, maybe I don't know who is coordinating the secretaries, has every ministry got a corporate plan? You see, they must tell now, if it is the agriculture ministry, what is the, are you all self-sufficient in food? Tell us, what is the cost of rice? What is the cost of vegetables? What is the cost of the fertilizer we are using? So there is nothing, you know, just someone takes a decision and these they are doing. You can't run a country in that way. No wonder that Singapore, Malaysia, all these countries have developed and we have gone into the dumps. We have the real brains behind all these things. We are professionals, but unfortunately, the system change, the right time is now. That is what we mean by system change. System change is the whole system has to be put in the right order. It is already there, but then various people think that if you are a member appointed by parliament, first of all, what do you get? I am there to serve the people. So give me maybe one of the best vehicles in the world and duty free. Now, these are the things, you know, I think we need to make a sacrifice. Now, you just see today's problem. We are having a petrol crisis. We are having a diesel crisis. But have we worked out the method by which this could be reduced? Now, if you look at all the government departments, look at the number of vehicles that they're having. Why not they say that these vehicles should not run? Maybe one vehicle or two vehicles for each ministry. Give the petrol to the hospitals. They can work, they can use it for the ambulance. But there is no plan because I don't know whether the secretaries know what they're doing, whether ministers know what they're doing, whether the higher ups know what they're doing. So that's why everyone is saying system change is necessary. So retraining of public servants is very essential. In professional, we have what is called continuing professional development. That means even if I qualify as a chartered accountant or a management accountant, I have to do my retraining. I have to get used to all the common things. But in the government, are they doing any training? Even the new people they recruit, they are not being trained. So we are in a very, very bad situation. So revenue, expenditure, cost are very important. Today we have, because the government doesn't realize what cost is. They get everything free. The budget is giving them the money. Now the private sector is shouting, what are the incentives we are getting? But the main item is the salaries that are being paid to them, and of course the pensioners. And today we have got a new item called the interest on loans. Last year, this time provision 1 billion for interest on loans. So where do we have any money for development? So I think the whole thing, as I say, needs a system change in the right direction. Train all our managers. Those days, the secretaries were sent overseas. They went and got a good exposure. When they came back, they were able to deliver the goods. That's the sort of thing that we should do. Mahathir Mohamad, every year, he sent 500 of the government servants overseas and trained them and got them back so that they could run the country. So we need to have a definite systems change. Otherwise, we will not be able to do it. Then the other important thing, accrual-based accounting. If there is no accrual-based accounting, you will not know how many loans you have to repay, how much of interest you have to repay, what are the assets that we are having. So that is why we need professional accountants. We need to implement these things, and the right people there should be to implement it. So I want to say that the highest priority for cost control, expenditure control, we must go on lean management. Lean management, actually no one has spoken of it, but we now need to put it in. Otherwise, we are sunk, you know, we are running with the begging bowl, and then what is happening, we are not being able to. Then I might just tell you, Dr. Vijay was talking about the IMF. What is the IMF formula? They have come to us earlier. They were very angry because we increased our taxes. 15% was the revenue to GDP. Then what happened? They reduced and it came to about 8 or 10%. So they were very angry. I think that is why they were shy to go and see the IMF, because they didn't do what they say. But now when the finance minister comes, first thing he will say, we have to increase all the taxes. We have to reduce the government expenditure. Our revenue and expenditure should be the same. Our productivity should be increased. As Dr. Vijay said, bring in the technology, increase the productivity, efficiency, good governance. Now that is the most important thing. Without good governance, there won't be any country left behind. The corruption, the wastage, all these things should be gone off. Then, of course, the public service is very important. 1.5 million public servants, train them, retrain them, and then get them to do value, provide value to the public. And that's very, very important. So, and the finance ministry on the accrual-based accounting. So I think we are now close to achieving success. A system change is very essential, and we will tell how this could be done. And let me thank everyone for listening, because I think we need a complete system change if we are to really make this country go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vatawala. Thank you, as always, for your passionate speech highlighting the importance of accountability and transparency aspects. As you know, Professor, today many professionals are asking for audits of parliamentarians, audits of institutions, so we can talk about these things later at the Q&A session. Thank you once again for your very passionate speech on the accountability and transparency aspects. Let me now move into Dr. B.K. Rajapaksa, Kulatunga Rajapaksa, as we call him. Dr. Rajapaksa was steering DSI Samsung Group as Group Managing Director from its inception and changed the country's shoescape, earlier dominated by multinationals and cheap imports. Dr. Rajapaksa is the firm support of Ganna Apede, which in English is translated as Buy Local Products. It's a campaign. He heads that campaign and also many other movements to stop unauthorized grey imports to Sri Lanka. Along with his brothers and third generation of the family, Mr. Rajapaksa is playing a leading role in molding DSI as a truly global company under the theme Local to Global. On behalf of DSI, he has won a large number of awards locally and internationally. Dr. Rajapaksa received Entrepreneur of the Year award from the Federation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry of Sri Lanka in the year 1994. He also received Sri Lanka Entrepreneur of the Year Hall of Fame award from the Federation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry of Sri Lanka on 11th of December 2017. Dr. Kulatunga Rajapaksa, over to you to talk about the impact of the present crisis that we are facing on the business sector.
Thank you, Dr. Mr. Ruchira Pereira, for the introduction given. Well, after hearing the speeches of Professor Vatawala and Dr. Vijayavardhana, they have been using the keywords of lean production, productivity. Those are keywords and buzzwords we are constantly using in all industries. So unfortunately, the voice of industrialists is never heard in most of the media. So therefore, it is essential that industries must run efficiently. And since we are short of foreign exchange, it is very important that industries are geared to increase of exports. Now, the present position here is quite different. All 100% export-oriented industries, they have a very little effect on the exchange fluctuation because they do have the back-to-back LCs to import raw materials. But industries that do not have the 100% export, but they have a major share of domestic market, they are short of dollars. So those companies who have the subsidiaries can borrow their dollars from the subsidiary companies and run, but other companies who do not have that facility are in serious trouble because banks doesn't have dollars at the moment. And even to take dollars, to open up an LC, you have to wait weeks and weeks. As you know, also the new regulation is all LCs either 180 days or it has gone to 210 days. Many suppliers or leading suppliers do not agree to give this facility. Even if they give a quotation, they want the LCs to receive within 7 days. But that is not happening. Therefore, the quotation is not valid after that. So therefore, industrialists are facing a serious crisis situation right now. Not all the local industries and even export-oriented industries as well, who are not 100% exports. So therefore, right now, there's a queues on gas, fuel. Very soon, there will be queues for local products as well, because we are unable to import the required raw materials. No industry in Sri Lanka can sustain without having imported component in their products. All manufacturing units are there, whether it may be cables, it may be switches, it may be woodware, it may be PVC pipes. There's always an imported component between it. If you don't have the raw materials, right products at the right time, there will be production delays. In addition to that, there's another issue that is coming up, the power cuts. as you know, in a large industry, especially the rubber industries, where we use heavy machinery, a sudden power breakdown or power cut is going to cost millions, because stopping and starting is a very costly exercise. So therefore, some of the machines, it needs at least 2 hours of heating before you start. So when the machine is stopped and the current is not there, machine gets cooled, then you need another 2 hours to get it heated. And once it is the maximum production, again power cut is there. So these are things that many of them don't understand, but the hardship that is faced by the industries. Then we have this 180 days payment scheme for LCs that have been opened. Right throughout, for quite a long time, dollar was pegged at 203 rupees. So therefore, at the end of 180 days, we pay for the bills at $203. But suddenly, dollar went up to 230, then 260, and now today 340. So those products those raw materials that we imported at the price of 203, assuming that the price is 203, after selling all that, when we come to the question of payment of the bills, we have to pay at enhanced rates of 260 or 340. Many companies, many large companies have massive exchange losses in their balance sheets now, because they never anticipate, because government repeatedly mentioned that they will not float dollars. That was the message given many times, and repeatedly this was given. Therefore, everybody expected that it will be not be floated. But had they informed that it will be floated, then it will be a gradual floating. If it is a gradual floating, we always take the risk and make the cost sheets accordingly. But this has not happened. So therefore, there are a lot of companies who have ended up in massive exchange losses. Then other situation is, most of the companies who are selling the products in the consumer market, it is mandatory that they are price mark the products. Now today, many companies are unable to do the price marking because everyday prices are changing. Even in our company, we have the same situation, because price marking has to be done, it can be printed price. So once it is printed, you can't change it. But somebody might think that, the price marking is not required because, the raw materials have been imported well ahead. Therefore, the cost of production is same. No, it is not the case. Because the bill payment comes subsequently after 180 days. You sell the goods well in advance. So therefore, now what we do is we forecast the dollar at 340 or 400 rupees and price mark on that. But if after 3 months, if that goes up again, companies will be having a serious problem. Right now, many companies have changed the prices many times. And the worst part of it is dealers and retailers who are selling our products, they have in their racks 3 or 4 prices for the same product. That they are also facing a serious difficulty. And on top of that, the moment they change the prices, they will get caught to the consumer authority will catch them, and there's a massive fine. So therefore, these are few things that industries are facing, and government is not aware of what's happening now. Then, since there's a difficulty in opening up LCs, what do? We get down in materials well in advance, more than the requirement. Earlier, of course, we were carrying about 1 month and 2 months inventories. Now, all the manufacturing companies have carried very high inventories, because they know very well that opening up the LC is a nightmare, and prices are changing, dollar rate is changing. Therefore, whenever they got an opportunity, they import materials more than what is really required. Sometimes they carry 6 to 7 months stocks. Then other point is congestion, the logistic cost. Suddenly the fuel prices went up. Again, in addition to the dollar prices, the dollar fluctuation or the rupee depreciation, this fuel prices, even if the fuel is available at the increased prices, doesn't matter. But right now, as a distribution company, we have a fleet of 200, 300 lorries. They are unable to get diesel, they have to be in queues. But those drivers and cleaners who had to be paid being in the queue for 1 or 2 or 3 days. So these again a cost that is added to the manufacturing cost. As Professor Vatavale mentioned, all these are costs. So therefore, our accountants always work out and say that the cost of logistics has gone up, please increase the prices. Because we have to see that our bottom line is met. Unlike our government, private sector can't have the bottom line negative. We have to give have the head over the water. So therefore, moment the item is going up, we have to immediately adjust the prices. Otherwise, our balance sheet will end up in negative. So the moment you have a balance sheet negative, we have a serious problem of borrowing from banks. Therefore, we have to be always online. Now, always, all the cost accountants in our companies are working day and night, because every day there is something that has gone up. So therefore, when you say transport of workers, we are providing workers transport. So therefore, that cost goes up. Again, that is added. Meal prices have gone up. Again added. Fuel prices have gone up. Electricity gone up. All those added, and electricity power breakdown again is a cost. So therefore, all industries are facing serious issues. And as you know, because of the COVID situation, all the freight rates have gone up by 300%, which we have been paying $200 per shipment earlier from one country. Now we are going to pay about $12 to $30,000. Sometimes the freight cost is more than the material cost. Even export, the same situation. There are certain export products that we can't export anymore. Buyers say your freight cost is more than the product cost. Therefore, we don't want to place orders to the items which are low in price now. Even though our prices are low, we are unable to export because of the freight cost. Then finished products. All the finished products, most of the companies are having, they don't price mark now, because they are price mark at the time of issue, because we don't know what the price tomorrow. This is again another cost added to the production line, because these are done automatically. Then today you would have seen AWPLR is exceeding 11%, and 3 months Treasury will can go on to 19.5%. So what will happen? Our OD rates will definitely shoot up beyond 15%. That works out to 1.5% per month. So then what happens? We as a distribution company, we can't extend credit facilities to our dealers. So dealers will start claiming that they need credit facilities, which we can't do, because 1.5% of the cost of the exercise is going to be a huge amount, because no company can run with a net profit of more than 6 to 7%. 1.5% bank interest itself will eat up all the profits. So now that has gone up. So that means we have to adjust the prices again. Then probably we may have to introduce the credit squeeze for our dealers. Then again, import restrictions. Now there are certain items that have been restricted import. So now all industries, there are certain items, there are some chemicals, there are some solvents that we are going to get this product to import. There are so many institutions that we have to go to get the approval. That is again another big issue, because industries, we don't have one-stop shop. We have to go to the Environmental Authority, we have to go to Import Control Department, we have to go to the Trade Ministry, we have to go to so many institutions and get the approval to get the clearance to import. And after getting all the clearance, bank doesn't permit us to open up the LC, because they don't have dollars. So therefore, most of the companies who have been managing with available dollars are carrying very heavy inventories now. Carrying heavy inventories itself, it is going to be a cost. Not only the cost, it occupies space, we have to have a rental building, all that. All these are going to be added to the cost of the production. That is why you see almost the products that have been there last January, 2021 January, and if you compare the prices today, the increase is about 200%. So therefore, the buying power of the consumer has gone down. Therefore, there's a production, the volume of production, economies of production has gone down. Many companies will definitely face crisis situation or may have to close down, because certain products, we need a volume to keep the prices down. If you don't have the volume, the cost of production will go up, because the overhead cannot be diluted. So these are few things that industries are facing, and there is no solution to that right now. We need some solution, because industries cannot run if you don't have dollars. So therefore, there should be some arrangement to give priority to industry to have dollars. especially for the local market. Export market, of course, that's not a very serious situation right now because you can do a back-to-back LC on that. But very few, there are a certain lot of companies who are getting to the domestic market. They all have to survive. They provide employment. So that's also important. So therefore, the situation now is right throughout. The industrialist voice is never heard. Only traders' voice are heard. You find they were in the media, dals, sugar, they are talking about all that. But nobody is talking about the difficulties that is faced by the industrialists. The industrialists are the people who are provided employment. Now, most of the companies, they employ 3,000 to 4,000 people. Now, if you have shut down, what are they going to, how many families will be starving? So this is something that will be very seriously considered. And if you don't have it, they are contributing, the contribution to GDP is extremely high. So therefore, I think with this forum, I think there should be some way where the industries must be given priority. We can't be waiting in queues to take diesel. We can't be waiting in the queues to open up LCs. We must be provided because if we run our organizations, only the country will have some sort of productivity, some sort of income. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajapaksha. Thank you for explaining the many difficulties the businesses are facing nowadays because of the financial and economic crisis that we are facing. So, Professor Vattamala, we can now move into question and answer session.
Yeah, okay, that's right. Yeah.
Right. So now there are some names have been mentioned in the question. So what I will do is I'll skip the names. I'll ask the questions in general. So I'll start with Dr. Vijayavardhana. So there is one question asking about the reasons for what we are going through nowadays. I think if I leave out the names, the question is basically about, is it because of negligence or is it because of ego?
It's not very clear, Ruchira. What does it mean?
So, the question has certain names, so I will skip the names. The question is basically about the crisis that we are facing today. Is it because of the negligence or ego?
I think we'll actually skip that question, Ruchira, because I don't think we should answer that question in this forum.
So second question is basically on theory. The second question is basically on someone is asking, some on the opposite camp like Bellwether and Eklund believe the solution to the monetary crisis is a currency board. But as Paul Krugman argues in his books, Latin American countries like Argentina and Mexico, although they have currency boards, they also borrow in dollars with reckless short runaway financing and still went through severe crisis. What do you think?
Well, of course, the answer to that question is that currency boards are not alien to Sri Lanka, because before the establishment of the central bank in 1950, during the colonial period from 1884 to 1950, we had a currency board. And of course, many of the British colonies except India, like Singapore, they had a currency board, Singapore, Hong Kong, and so forth. So what we did was, instead of continuing with the currency board system, we established a central bank in Sri Lanka, because we thought that given the necessity for providing a greater amount of liquidity to the economy, when the economic output expands, currency board is an impediment, and therefore we went for the central bank and permitted the central bank to print money excessively over and above the reserves which central bank had been keeping. Now, in the case of a currency board, the main feature is that if you want to issue 1 rupee, suppose we will say that the 1 rupee is equal to $1, the currency board should have $1, and without having a $1, it can't issue a 1 rupee. If they have $10, they can issue 10 rupees according to our parity here. And if the country loses, say, $5 because of a deficit in the balance of payments, the currency board will recall 5 rupees and destroy the 5 rupees. So that is how it happens. So in the case of a currency board, the growth is like a solid building. If you go to the Bank of Ceylon building in Fort, it has a simple foundation and it grows in the same foundation above. That is how the currency board operates. In the case of a central bank, you have a very small capital base and you grow sideways. So it's just like an inverted pyramid. So if anybody can, tilt it to this way, the central bank will collapse. To the other way, central bank will collapse. So because of these reasons, and because of the frustration with which we have the present central banking system in Sri Lanka, many people have argued that Sri Lanka should have a currency board, and one of the main proponents of that particular system is Professor Steve Hanke, Jones of Hopkins University. He had been arguing all throughout we should have a currency board. Of course, he has good reason to suggest that because Central Bank of Sri Lanka has failed in the past to protect the money that we are having. For example, if we had 1 rupee in year 1952, its value today is even less than a 10% of the things of a cent. So it has gone down. I mean, so that is why many people are arguing that central bank has failed, and we had seen that the central bank has failed in the last 3-year time period with W.D. Lakshman as the governor and also with Ajitnath Kabral as the governor. So as a result, because of in fact, the present crisis that we are having today, the main culprit is the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, because it had produced money more than necessary. And if I give the figures, the total money stock in the country has increased during the last 26-month period, starting from December 2019. Had been 3.1 trillion Sri Lanka rupees, or 40%. Usually, a responsible central bank is supposed to increase the money supply at the same rate as economic growth, so that there is no any excess money supply produced by the central bank. So that's the formula being used by all the central banks in the world. But Professor W.D. Lakshman and also followed by Ajitnath Kabral, they followed a different kind of a monetary theory known as the modern monetary theory, in which it was said that there is no any harm in central banks printing money and financing the activities. But we now see what has actually happened by following that monetary theory, because the inflation is now rising, exchange rate has depreciated, we have depleted the entirety of the foreign reserve that we have. So because of this reason, the frustration is that that our central bank has failed, and therefore there is this demand for establishing a currency board instead of a central bank. The currency board, the advantage is that it will discipline both the people in the central bank and the people in politics. Because you can't print money according to your wishes, because if you want to print money, you must have an equivalent amount of reserves, foreign reserves. If you don't have an equivalent amount of foreign reserves, you can't print money. So therefore, it will discipline the people in the central bank, because when you have a currency board, the governor cannot say that the money supply, money doesn't affect the inflation, money does not affect the depreciation of the currency, and he cannot, print more money than necessary. Now, for example, today, you would have seen when the Treasury bill auction was held, as I mentioned earlier, 97.5 billion rupees were offered in the market. Even after allowing the interest rates to go up by 100 basis points, they were able to get only 50% of that. So the balance 50% will have to be printed by the central bank and given to the government. Under a currency board system, that cannot happen, because the currency board should have 100% reserves with that. So this discipline is a pretty much thing that is needed because in the case of Singapore, when it had the choice of either establishing a central bank or going along with the currency board system that had been given to them by the colonial masters, the new rulers in Singapore in 1965, when it was separated from Malaysia, decided to go along with the currency board system because it introduced the discipline. The first Singaporean finance minister, Dr. Goh Keng Swee, while presenting the bill for currency board in parliament, he had said that by having this type of a policy, he is going to give messages to three types of people. One message is to the future politicians of central bank. The second message is to the citizens of Singapore. The third message is to people outside Singapore. The message to the politicians, future politicians, is if you want to incur vote-catching expenditure programs, you must bring money from home and not the money printed by the central bank. The message to their own citizens is that if you want better public services, you must be prepared to pay for them. There is no such thing as a free lunch. I mean, in Sri Lanka, we still think there's a free lunch. The message to people outside outside Singapore is, in the rest of the world in Singapore, is that you leave your savings with us. We will not only use those savings productively, but also ensure the attractive return to you annually and the safe return of the principal that you have set with us. Now, you can see, this type of, now this was 1965, when Sri Lanka Central Bank and all the finance ministers were, printing money like nothing. So that is why, in fact, the Singapore's economy had prospered, whereas Sri Lanka's economy had actually gone down. But we have a problem today. If you want to convert the present central bank of Sri Lanka to a currency board, we can't do it because one reason is our central bank has a negative foreign reserves. Now, nobody knows about it because our people think that the central bank publishes only the gross foreign reserve that it has. When it says that it has 1.9 billion worth of US dollar worth of foreign reserve, that's a misleading indicator because the net amount of foreign reserves of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, after we deduct the foreign liabilities of the central bank, the net position is negative to the extent of 3.2 billion US dollars as at the end of February, and it is much more than as at end of March. That is because the total foreign liabilities of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, because of the soft facilities it has got from China, India, Bangladesh, and various other places, it's about 5 billion US dollars. Now, if you want to set up a currency board, we have to first pay this out. So we need 5 billion US dollars with us. Second one is central bank's current reserve money position is about 1,400 billion Sri Lanka rupees. And even if we convert it into US dollars at the current exchange rate of 340 rupees per US dollar, we need another 3 billion US dollars to capitalize the central bank. Now look at 3 billion plus 5 billion, 8 billion. And there is no one who would give us this 8 billion US dollars simply to set up a currency board in Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka government cannot do that. And there is no any other merciful donor who would do that. So that's the difficulty that we are having. So therefore, in my view, we can actually discipline the Central Bank of Sri Lanka by introducing an appropriate legislation to make it more independent, and that is one of the demands of the International Monetary Fund from the government of Sri Lanka when it gives this extended fund facility to Sri Lanka, because it has already emphasized the fact that Central Bank of Sri Lanka should be made more independent, its accommodation of the government should be restricted. The board should be made accountable and responsible. Now, today our problem is we have a monetary board which is a black box. And we don't know what they are doing. And eventually what we see is that, as Professor Lakshman had said, we have lost the value of our money. And if you had listened to Dr. Kulatunga Rajapaksa, he had a long list of, grievances, no? And all these grievances have been created by our monetary board. So that is why IMF is asking for making the present central bank more independent, make it more accountable, make it more transparent, and the governors cannot just say, I have done this. We cannot, because it's a transparent and accountable institution. So that is why I don't see that we can set up a currency board right now in Sri Lanka, even though that may be the most desirable thing to discipline the politicians of the country.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for explaining in detail the functionality of the currency board and why it is difficult for a country like us to have a currency board right at this moment. Now, Professor Vatawala and also Dr. Kulatunga Rajapaksa, I would want to move into you. So now there is an opinion. Some people are saying, okay, we should not audit the parliamentarians and state institutions. Rather, we should do investigations. What do you think about that?
Actually, investigations is a different type of thing. No, you see, if you do an audit and if you find that this needs further maybe looking into it, then it's an investigation that you want to do, because now in Sri Lanka, I think Dr. Vijayawardena will be able to tell about that. There is a forensic audit that was done, on the central bank. But what really happened? Nothing, So really, I think I would like to ask Dr. Vijayawardena that question, about this forensic audit. What was the real, there was a big, I think, so many volumes that were there, but what was the actual result of this forensic audit?
Well, Professor Vatawala, what actually happened was, I have even, written about it earlier, the methodology used by the auditors, KPMG India and BDO India, had been defective. Because they had not, because actually I was also consulted by them when they prepared the report. I told them that they cannot estimate or accurately assess the loss that would have incurred as a result of this bond transaction starting from Governor Kabnal's time, because it's not possible. And what they should do is, frankly, tell in their report that they should not do that. But of course, Professor Vatawala, there are many positive things that they have found in the forensic audit report. One is the abuse of the system by former finance minister and some of the officers in the Employees Provident Fund Department to benefit for themselves and for the master they had been working. I don't know to mention the name here. And that had been documented by the auditors very clearly, and you would have taken legal action against them. Of course, the legal action was taken against these people prior to the release of the forensic audit report, and you noted that they were acquitted and discharged by the Sri Lankan courts of law because the Attorney General had failed to present the case properly. And there had been, that is only number one. Number two, in the share market, they had gone behind the investment of, shares in the share market, and they have found out there is pumping and dumping done by certain individuals that had been presented. And that the SEC could have taken action on that, but SEC had failed to do it. So it was actually the cost of the forensic audit report was about 400 billion Sri Lanka rupees. As Professor Vatawala says, it was a total waste of scarce money that we have in the Central Bank of Sri
Lanka. Dr. Rajapaksa, I would want to know your views also on the impact of auditing. Do you also think that auditing is important and we should audit the parliamentarians and maybe state institutions going forward?
Yes, definitely. Auditing has to be done because it is not the auditing. Now, COPE is doing, but COPE is not auditing the parliamentarians. Parliamentarians must be auditing. I think in other countries they are doing it. People will come with the pauper and you end up after 5 years as a billionaire. So I think definitely you must do an audit because people are coming to the parliament not to earn money. They should come to service. Auditing is must, and this audit report must be published. Just having the published shelfie won't work. It must be published. And they may be made answerable. And if possible, that report can be accepted to the courts and take legal action for money laundering or whatever the illegal way of earning money. I think we have to do that. Because all companies are doing the audit now. Every company, public company and private company, they are doing audits. So I see no reason why, because the parliament, being a parliamentary mayor, it's just a business now. Therefore, it must be audited. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Vijayavadan, there's another question on the foreign remittances. The person is asking, how long will it take for the country to feel comfortable even if we get the foreign remittances?
Well, of course, the foreign remittances had been the savior of Sri Lanka in the past because we had a huge deficit in the trade account, amounted to about, say, $8 billion US. We had been receiving foreign remittances in the past, not in year 2022 and 2021, amounted to about, say, $7 billion US per annum. So the bulk part, about, say, 90% of the trade deficit was financed out of the foreign remittances that had been received by us. For example, if you go to a petrol station and if you fill the tank of our car with petrol, we should always remember that facility had been afforded to us by the people who have sent dollars from outside. And today, what has happened is now normally we used to get about, say, 650 to 700 million US per annum per month as foreign remittances, and it has come down to 200 million US in February 2022, and we don't get the March figure. Central Bank has not released it. I am told that it's even less than 100 million. But if we can eliminate this, unofficial system of remitting money to Sri Lanka via Undial and Hawala, and also various WhatsApp groups and the Facebook groups, which are now in operation in the market, we would be able to get the money back through the formal banking system. For that purpose, our banks will have to imitate the system which Hawala and Undial are using. For example, if you take the Hawala and Undial, they just go and visit the person who is working to his workplace. As a result, he doesn't have to go to a bank, nor does he have to fill a form. Dollars are collected from him. Then the rupee value of that is delivered to the doorstep of the person who has to receive it in Sri Lanka. Our banks also will have to imitate this practice, because without doing that, you can't eliminate the Hawala and Undial system. But if we can go back to the old flow of foreign remittances amounting to, say, $7 billion US, it will be a very high relief to Sri Lanka today. But it doesn't solve our problems. Even in the past, it had been financing about, say, 90% of our trade deficit. But the most important thing is, as Professor Vatavala and also Dr. Kulathunga Rajapaksa has mentioned, we have to promote exports. Export not only the merchandise export, but also the export of goods and services, and earn more foreign exchange rather than depending on the remittances flows.
Dr. Vijayavadan, if I can just ask a question on that. Now, it is mainly due to the exchange rate, no? How do you see whether we can do an adjustment on that and try to get this money? Well,
actually, I think a question arises now. Some people were asking why we have failed in the, even Dr. Kulathunga Rajapaksa also mentioning there is a huge uncertainty about the exchange rate in Sri Lanka today, which is correct. That is because the way that the central bank has floated the currency is completely wrong. I have written about it, giving my experience in year 2001 when S. Javadhan was the governor, because we floated the currency, but prior to floating, there's a lot of activities that you have to do. Governor S. Javadhan increased the bank rate, that is the lending rate of the central bank, from 16% to 25%. Now, by 9 percentage points, he increased it. Now, many people think that it is Nandalal Wilson who had made the highest increase. No, prior to that, S. Javadhan had done it. So that nobody had incentive to keep money out. Second one is he had spoken to IMF, got the IMF to stand by Sri Lanka. So when we floated the currency on the 23rd of January in 2001, immediately after that, the IMF issues a statement saying that that was the correct policy action central bank has taken, and IMF will stand by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. That statement carried a lot of weight, and as a result, the exchange rate immediately fell to from say 80 rupees per US dollar to 95 rupees per US dollar. But then the speculators realized that there is this big institution called the International Monetary Fund is standing by Sri Lanka, and therefore they started bringing back the foreign exchange. And in about say 2 weeks' time, the rupee started appreciating and finally settled around 88 rupees per US dollar. Now, this is the mistake done by Governor Cabral, because he had just allowed the rupee to fall without taking this preliminary action. There are preliminary actions that has to be done. Had he spoken to me, I would have explained it. But unfortunately, things were done without being consulted by anybody. And according to Andhra Priyadarsana, who had spoken in Parliament today, this has done just by one stroke of pen. Because the Central Bank Monetary Board, which has been summoned by the Finance Committee of Parliament, had told the Finance Committee it had been done by one stroke of pen without looking at any of the other implications that we might have. For us to actually eliminate the black market and get the money through the formal system, what we have to do is now S. Javadhan's policy was to allow the rupee to depreciate over and above the rate at the black market, so that there is no incentive for people to send it through black market. Then, of course, what happens is when you get the money through the formal system by getting this assurance by the International Monetary Fund, the black market disappears automatically. Now, today, what has happened is interest rates were increased only by Nandalal Veerasinghe after he became the governor. We are still negotiating with the IMF. So we are just like, nowhere. It's nowhere. So that's why Dr. Kulathunga Rajapaksa has the problem of the great uncertainty in the exchange rate, and he cannot now even price the commodities according to him.
Thank you,
Thank you, Doctor.
Doctor, now there's another question relating to IMF. The person is asking, is IMF the only solution? I'll explain it a bit further. If IMF's discussions come to a standstill, what are the other options available?
Well, of course, it is too late today. Of course, we'll have to admit the fact that the patient is dead now. Even with IMF, you cannot, bring life to a dead man. Because as President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had admitted when he addressed the new ministers, he had said we would have gone to IMF earlier than now. Had we gone to IMF, say, early 2021, we would have avoided this catastrophe. And today it is too late, but I really admire the courage of the new governor and the new Minister of Finance to go before IMF and, making their case on our behalf. As he says, as the questioner says, that the discussions are still not progressing very well. According to the statement by the IMF's the mission chief on Sri Lanka, we are still at a very early stage of negotiation. It might also fail, we don't know, because I will have to tell you now, there are certain preconditions that we have to satisfy if we want to go get a facility for IMF. Number one is floating the currency that we have done. Number two is tightening the monetary policy that is also being done by Nandalal Veerasimha. Third one is not to accommodate any funding requirements of the government. Now, today also we accommodated 50% of the Treasury bill issue. So that we have failed. Fourth one is IMF says government will have to increase its revenue by increasing the income tax rate and the value-added tax rate and not tax rate, and not by resorting to unsustainable, not non-quality type of tax measures like this surcharge on profits earned in the past and so forth. What it actually means is that Sri Lanka will have to go back to the taxation system which we had prior to year 2019. And I expected the Minister of Finance or President to rise up and say, we have made a mistake, now we have to go back. It has not happened. So that part has not happened. Then make the central bank independent. Now these are the preconditions. And unless the Sri Lankan team is able to assure the IMF that within a reasonable period of time, they would introduce all these reforms, as the questioner has said, it will come to a standstill. Then the question is, what would happen to us? Now, answer is clear, it's a dead body. All we can do is to bury the dead body or cremate the dead body. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Professor Vatavela, now apart from auditing, as cost and management accountants, what we can do to overcome this situation? How can we assist the government?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier in my talk also. And actually before that, I just want to tell one thing that I made in my speech, that is about the reserves. I think that was Dr. Vijayawardena gave a very good reply on that the central bank reserves are negative. So I think this reserve is really a cash flow statement. So I'm very happy that we were able to get the correct statement from Dr. Vijayawardena, who's been in the central bank and was able to give the right position. Now, costing is very important because, as I said earlier, today no government servant feel the cost, because they think they are getting the money free. Now you see, if you take a private sector institution, unless they earn the money, they will not be able to pay the cost. Now you see, just see with the COVID-19 pandemic, most of the companies, the big companies, cut the salaries because they could not afford to pay the cost. But that enabled them to survive. And then once things are good, then they were able to pay this back. But this is not felt by the government, no? So I think that is very essential, and we should not give the money that they ask immediately. I think they must cut their costs at least by minimum 25%. You see the number of vehicles, as I told you, the number of fuel, the telephone bills, the excess staff that they are having. So all these are there, plus they must be given the responsibilities. If the agriculture ministry is there, they must go to the field, As I said, they must see that if fertilizer is given, that it is being used, the highest productivity is obtained. It should make us self-sufficient. Then they should know the cost of production. Now that cost also they don't know. Now today, look at the vegetables, look at the rice, everything, the prices have gone up. So no one knows how this situation has arisen. Of course, Dr. Vijayawardena will say, economics point of view, the supply and demand situation. So that's why we need to look at this, and then we are talking of accountability. Then the agriculture ministry, are they responsible? No one is responsible. No. At the end of the day, the farmer is suffering, but they get their salary. Government servant is getting salary. Then look at the exports. Now we have to increase the exports. So then we have the Export Development Board. We have a ministry. Now they must be given the targets. No? Then they must work with the private sector in order to achieve it. So they really have to do their work, and they have to, as I said, everyone is asking for a system change. So that is the system change. System change means you have to work. There is nothing like Dr. Vijayawardena saying, no free lunch. You have to work. Now see the DSI group, Dr. Rajapaksa now, they were able to beat the multinationals and to become the #1 footwear manufacturer in Sri Lanka. How did they achieve it? Not by just talk or anything, but real work, hard work. So if they have been able to do, I think they will be able to show the work, show this example to everyone, every industrialist in this country as to how we can beat the multinationals and really come on top and make Sri Lanka a paradise. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Vijayavardhana, this question is also to you. The question is basically about the ideal level of revenue collection. Ideal level of revenue collection for us to easily pay our debt obligations.
Well, of course, if you go back to year 2000, the government revenue was, say, 25% of our GDP. Now it has come down to 11% of GDP. So the ideal level of revenue for us right now is that, we must have a surplus in the budget. I mean, the question is like this, if somebody asks, how long should the legs of a guy long, we have to say as to reach the ground level, no, nothing else. So likewise, the ideal level of revenue is we must have a surplus in the budget. So budget surplus, now presently it is 12% of GDP budget deficit. So we have to increase the revenue, and that's why IMF says that we have to increase the revenue, plus we have to curtail some of the unnecessary consumption expenditure, but at the same time increase the capital expenditure programs of the government. If we have a surplus in the budget, and that surplus can be used by Sri Lanka to pay out the existing foreign debt, but the process we call retiring the foreign debt, retiring the domestic debt, that by doing that, the Sri Lanka would actually be reducing the level of its debt to the domestic citizens as well as the people outside the country. Now, if you take a country like Thailand, after the East Asian financial crisis of 1997-98, Thai government deliberately went for a surplus budgeting system. Even now, they have a surplus budget there. By cutting down the expenditure and increasing the revenue levels, and they were able to reduce the dependence on the foreign savings and foreign borrowings by the government. So ideal level of revenue that we must have is that revenue which would enable Sri Lanka to have a surplus in the budget, converting from the current deficit of 12% to a surplus.
Thank you, Doctor.
This just Rujira, one matter I just want to put to Dr. Vijayavardhana. You know, I was reading the Institute of Policy Studies report, that was in 2017. And they, in their report, said that the government will have to really look at the ISPs and syndicated loans scheduled for repayment over the year, 3 years beginning 2019. Do you think that government really took any notice of this?
No, Professor Vattabella. Actually, we are just like monkeys. No, monkeys are thinking of, building houses only when the rain comes. Because we are not having this forward planning in Sri Lanka at any time. I mean, it's actually a matter for your organization, building up, getting Sri Lanka's private sector as well as the government sector to have forward planning. We don't have forward planning in Sri Lanka. Even today, we don't have. That was simply ignored.
Okay, Rujira, thanks.
Thanks, Doctor. Professor, there are two questions to you. Maybe Dr. Kulathunga Rajapaksa can also answer these questions. One is asking whether you have read Mr. Dhammikapara's guidelines for ministries. And the other question is about the role of professionals in the government sector. Even though they are absorbed into the government sector, they are not able to perform as expected. Is it because of lack of skills, or their hands are tied?
Well,
I think Dr. Rajapaksa, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, Dr. Rajapaksa, you can answer it.
Happens is as Professor Vattabala mentioned, we need financial and costing accounts in government. Those who are qualified and experienced. That when we take accountants to our organization, we always give them targets. They must perform. If they don't perform, we don't allow to keep. Their promotions are not given, their increments are not given. Now here, the professionals are taken into the government on beams and fancies to the politicians. So those who are rejected by the private sector are the people who are joining the government sector. This is one of the main reasons. I might take this opportunity to mention again another important thing about the foreign exchange shortage. The foreign exchange shortage, we talked this Hawala and Undial system, but now that is expanding because most of the exporters, non-traditional exporters, are now faced with the difficulty of keeping their buyers because there are a lot of external people who buy their products and export at a lower price to the same buyers and use those dollars for this Hawala and Undial operation. That is one reason. Another thing is the export revenue figures that are given in the central bank are export figures only. Those figures are not the figures that we have received dollars. Right? I can remember quite a long time ago. I think many all the senior citizens can remember the Paget Road incident, right? Where the foreign exchange frauds taken to the Paget Road and given. But earlier there was a rule within 180 days of export, the proceeds will be brought into Sri Lanka. Now that has been totally withdrawn, and there are money lying abroad, not bringing in here, and they have the cross trade also taking place. Without bringing that foreign exchange to Sri Lanka, they use that money to import some other products, which was not allowed. We were not allowed, but all exports proceeds must be brought into Sri Lanka within 100 days, and if they want to import something else, you have to again open up LCs and go to normal procedures. Now there are a lot of money available in foreign countries, not brought into Sri Lanka, and there's no monitoring system at all. So that is one of the reasons. And also the immigrants, the housemates and all the remittances are happening because those are the money that are in use. Now, lot of import restrictions have been brought in. Do you see any shortage of any products in the market? You find all sorts of fight in the market. How is that? That is, those money are being used to import material under open account. Open accounts are in the very common practice now in the customs. So therefore, these loopholes have to be closed to prevent the black market coming up. Because we are now, with the system that we brought in, we are expanding the black market now. That's what's happening. Thank you.
I think, I think Dr. Vijayawardena maybe
Yes,
comments.
Well, yeah, I think I can add to that because I haven't read this Dhammika Perera's, prescription. Therefore, I'm not in a position to comment on that. I hope that he may have presented a very valuable suggestion about the improvement of the efficiency and the productivity of the public sector. It's a must because we all know in the case of Sri Lanka's public sector, the productivity level is very low because the penetration of the information and communication technology in the public sector is also low. But it doesn't mean that Sri Lanka's public sector cannot be reformed. I will give you one example. There is this Dompe District Hospital, which has converted itself the patient management system from one end to the other through digitization of the records. First government hospital and the only government hospital which has done that miracle. And actually, I have written about it because they have been able to train the old nurses, old people there, how they could use a computer in order to record the things and also read the thing. Now, for example, everything is in digital form. There is no necessity for the patient, if he wants to get this treatment from the outpatient department, to come with the card, get the card from the the storeroom, and then take it to the doctor. Doctor will write on that, then it will be handed back to the thing. It doesn't happen there in the Dompe hospital. Anybody who wants to pass through Dompe hospital, I highly recommend to him visit it and see how the miracles can be done in the public sector. So that kind of introduction of information communication technology will improve its services. We can cut down the number of people, and also we can cut down, as a result of that, the salary that we have to pay to those public servants. And all these things we can do by improving the productivity and the efficiency of the public sector. And it's a must, because Professor Steve Hanke had sent me a message now. He has said that whatever the money that we might get from the IMF will be just, gone through a black hole. So that means, the public sector is so inefficient, even this money that we get from the whatever will be, just thrown into a black hole. That's what he had sent me now.
Actually, Ruchira, if I can add to what Dr. Vijayawardena says, in 1977, they opened up the economy. Everyone said that the two state banks, People's Bank and Bank of Ceylon, will collapse because the open economy. You know what they did? They went to digitization. The IT, they implemented the IT, and that really transformed the two banks. If not for that, today the banks would have all gone for 6. So I think the same transformation can be done for the public servants. They would like to learn. They would like to get into this digitization and then do the services. And today we have the new concept, work from home. So why do they want to travel? If you give them all the facilities, let them work from home. I think the government servants, I think this is the best solution that we can do. And the best example I can give you is the People's Bank and the Bank of Ceylon. Today, they are really, if you look at the banks, they are really one of the top areas of digitization. You go to one branch, you can, you don't have to have your account in that branch, you can access anywhere. So this is just an example. Similar service can be given by the public sector.
So there was another question in the list of questions. In one of the questions, it was asking the inability, why the professionals are facing in the government organizations. The person was asking whether it is because of the inability of them or because their hands are tied.
No, actually, I don't. Sorry, Dr.
Yes.
No, what I want to say is that, you see, professionals should be given the proper task. Now, those days we had, I know the Treasury, they had the people who were monitoring the public sector were chartered accountants. But today, I don't know how all these things have changed or what is happening. But there is no, because you see now, I just want to tell you, now we have two types of people. Now, professional accountants of business are people who are on the operational field. Then we also have the auditors who look at the work that has been completed and done. So the operational people have to be really active, and that's really the function that will have to be carried out. And the finance ministry, I don't know why, I think Dr. Vijayawardena may be able to give the answer. If you look at the heads of the finance ministry, they have come from the central bank, So that's why I'm saying, why can't the finance ministry train people and then bring them up to a level where they can run the ministry, because they are really used to the operational side, the budgeting, the finance monitoring, everything is there, But even today, we are having someone from the finance ministry. Dr. Jayasundara was from the finance ministry. Artikala was from the finance ministry. So a lot of them have been running it. So I don't know whether the problems we have encountered is as a result of that. I just don't want to say that, but I'm wondering whether that is also one of the results.
Well, about this finance ministry affair, Professor Vattamala, the objective was completely different. It was actually provided training to central bank officers as to how the budgetary affairs are managed in the country, but not to go and rule those institutions. Objective was that.
Doctor, I would end the Q&A session with this question to you. This question is about the rising interest rates and the exchange rate depreciation. The question is about where it will end.
Well,
it will go out of control.
nobody can give an answer to that, because the situation in the country is so uncertain today, and the inflation rate is rising at at a level which we cannot even think of. Because as I have told you, these people like Professor Steve Hanke of the Johns Hopkins University, who keeps a track of Sri Lanka's inflation, he has put it at 74% now, and it is on the increase. So when you have an inflation rate of 74%, naturally the savers are expecting a higher rate of return. And that is why in today's Treasury bill auction, even after increasing the rate by 100 basis points to 24%, they were able to get only 50% of what they had offered in the market. So as a result, we will have to expect a high interest rates, further depreciate the currency. And I will give you an example from Zimbabwe. At one stage, the interest rates were about 1,000%, but even that was not sufficient because the inflation rate was 1 billion% at that time. So our main problem is the inflation. Now, inflation here, which is that you have to blame Governor Lakshman and also Governor Cabral. They said, money printing doesn't affect inflation. Money printing doesn't affect exchange rate depreciation. And everybody believed them, except, people like us. So now, of course, the inflation has already been built into our system. It will go up, and the interest rates and also the exchange rate will have to be adjusted according to that.
Thank you, sir. Professor, then I will wind up the session.
I think yes, time.
Professor Vatawala?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you can wind up. Yeah.
Thank you very much for all the speakers, for your wonderful presentations and for the very interesting discussion. So to officially conclude the session, let me hand over now to Professor Lakshmanar Vatawala.
Thank you, Ruchira. I think we are come up to our time limit. First of all, let me thank Dr. Vijayawardena, because I know that how much he is in demand, because when I spoke to him, he said, okay, he is prepared to speak because we are going to take the right path to overcome financial and economic crisis, because I know that he is happy at the moment that we are going in the right path and the right direction. So I do hope that Dr. Vijayawardena, that you will be able to help those who are holding the reins, so that they will do, but also that the government will listen to what is being said, because if they don't listen, I think they will fall into big trouble. And I know that the package that the finance minister will bring is all what we discussed, that is the increasing of taxes and all the good management that we will have to do, but I'm sure that will do a lot of good. So thank you, Dr. Vijayawardena. We are very thankful for being with us. And Dr. Kulatunga Rajapaksa, I must thank you very much, because we really need the local industry to develop, the exports to develop, and exports are in great demand. And I think that is a very, very essential area. And what was mentioned by Dr. Vijayawardena on the digitalization, we need to expand our education in the digital area. And this cannot be done by the government sector. We need to now go for public-private partnership. This is the only way that the government will be able to survive. They cannot do it. In fact, I can say that a lot of the mistakes that the government has been making is due to not going to public-private partnership. Even the foreign loans that we have taken, we would have converted them to investment and not for loans if we went for public-private partnership. So we have made all these mistakes, but we need to really go in the right direction. So today's our webinar has looked into quite depth, because if the industry, now the local industries have a major role to play, but they need also to be given that assurance that they will be able to take it forward, because otherwise the local talent, the local industries, the skills, all these things are there. So let me thank Dr. Kulatunga Rajapaksa for going through all these. I know that there are a lot of some say wish list, but we have complaint list that was put up by the industrial and export sector. I must also thank Mr. Ruchira Perera, our council member, for controlling our event and also for handling the Q&A very well. And all our participants, actually we had a registration of over 500, but due to the current situation, I think we had about 160 or 170 coming, so which I think was very good. So once again, let me thank everyone, and we will also make the recording available to everyone so that they can then make use of it and also give it to others. And thank you again, Dr. Vijayawardena and Dr. Kulukunda Rajapaksa for your very, very effective maybe speeches and also explaining, because today we heard so many things which would not have been very easy, especially for the accounting professionals to get to know. So I am very, very happy that this has thrown a lot of light. And as I said, these are continuing professional development programs. So we are deeply grateful to everyone for enlightening our accountants and also those from the corporate sector who attended it. Thank you, and wish you all the very best. And we keep in touch. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you all. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Thanks, thanks, Dr. Vijayawardena. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
you,
you.
Professor.
Thanks, Dr.
Thank you,
Kulukunda.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good
Right.
night.
Okay. Right. Okay. We've Tarinja, we can close up. No?
Okay, Professor.